are back with another CSM19 interview. And today we are finally with Bexey Songweaver. Everything is up and running and going correctly for once. So now...
You're on my backup equipment, so, therefore I have to look up if I want to look at the camera because it's on top of the screen rather than actually being anywhere useful.
Yeah, mine is too. But do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us when and why you started playing Eve?
All right. So I knew. I'm going to fold this in a rather interesting segue. I used to go drinking. Well, I still do go drinking in a local bar, and one of the patrons there was a brewer, which is something which I'm very interested in, as you will see from my Eve profile. I'm also a brewer. And he used to be part of a big corporation in Eve and would regale me with stories about these massive, massive fights where you would lose maybe a significant percentage of the wealth of the entire New Eden galaxy in these fights. And it kind of okay, fine. And I carried on playing EverQuest for as long as I did. And finally, I got back into Eve during COVID because I had time on my hands and wanted something to do other than soloing, or yet again soloing on myself in EverQuest. So the name Bexey Songweaver is my old out's name in EverQuest, the original MMORPG. So I have a lot of experience in playing these role-playing games. I was a guild leader at one point. I know about generating content and the challenges of doing it. I know about the various irritations of having to deal with developers when they do stupid stuff. And as a personal, as my career is as a program manager doing massive, huge projects, hundreds of people working for me. I also know about the importance of getting it right so that you don't have customers taking out contracts on you to rearrange you after you deploy the bloody thing. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, I bring the experience of running a small business, running huge projects in software delivery and understanding of that side of it, a lot of experience in playing games, and a reasonable amount of experience with Eve. I wouldn't say I'm a in-depth player. Actually, I tend to play at a fairly easy-going level, but I'm an in-depth player, and I understand the difficulties of new players in particular, and the challenges of going from okay, we've just done a little bit of stuff, to saying, am I actually going to invest time and effort to go ahead with this game and make it part of my recreational life?
Okay, so is this the first time that you have decided to run for CSM?
Yeah, it actually kind of came out of a conversation with a couple of the devs and Helmer himself, because I was making some representations about some of the observations I made in game at various levels. And I said, okay, why don't you stand for CSM next time round? So I am.
Very good. You've probably thought about what you are going to campaign for. Can you give me 3 items?
Yeah, I think the there are 3 bugbears of mine. I mean, the first one is obviously the new player retention and the behaviour. I think in particular something that one of the other candidates you interviewed brought up, the harassment of new players in HiSec. And I think we really need to have a conversation about what HiSec's for and what it is. Too often there are maybe a minority of players, but there are players who just harvest people in ventures in HiSec because it's easy. They can get their kill mails for whatever corporation they are involved in, and they don't care that they have pretty well frightened off a player. And it particularly comes true when it comes to people when they manage to scrape together enough to buy their first coveter or their first procurer, and it gets blown up by someone who's then shit talking them in. So that part of the game really needs some attention as to what it is that we think HiSec is for and what the behaviour should be in HiSec. Maybe we should think HiSec should be more HiSec and maybe should be smaller to compensate it. Maybe we should look at super high sec as an option for people who really don't want to be. And maybe we should sort of question ourselves about how we have, what path we have, and how we create a path for new players to segue into the broader game. Because I know players who have gone straight into wormhole specs and have thrived. But Howes, who was my corporation leader, makes the point in my CSM application channel. He knows of hundreds of players. He's predominantly someone who takes newer players into his corporations, and he knows of hundreds of players who've quit because of this harassment. So it is an issue. It needs to be discussed, and we need to think about ways of dealing with it. Sorry, I'm burping. I'm drinking my own beer here, by the way. And that's to stop me coughing. So the second one, I think it's some of the sort of more legacy items which haven't really been thought through as the game progresses. I mean, I've had questions about skyhooks, for example. This is very new, and they need adjustment. They need to work out how they go. But we need to also ask about POCOs. You know, there are POCOs sitting around the whole of New Eden, which have sat there for donkey's years. Nobody does anything about them. Some of the people aren't even playing the game anymore, and we need to ask ourselves some serious questions about POCOs and tidying them up. Around about 3 years ago, they started to they introduced the idea of having fuel blocks for player-owned stations. This was a new thing. I think 3 years ago. You correct me if I'm wrong.
Something like that, yeah.
And this was so that the stations would expire. If they weren't paid attention to, they would expire. And I think something similar to that should happen with POCOs, so that if you've got a corporation which has basically died, then maybe the POCOs should go with it. And finally, I think there are some general UX improvements, user experience, that need to be tidied up. In particular, it's things like static windows on the left-hand side of the screen that if you click on the edge of them, they don't come to foreground. It's irritating stuff in UX, and maybe responding to a question that's going to come up of what you feel the role of the CSM is. If you think of it in terms of, rather than council of stellar management, customer service manager, then the bringing back stupid bits of programming which either are legacy or just irritating back to the developers is very specifically part of what this sort of role involves. Making sure that they see, okay, this is something stupid, let's fix it, and see how much of a fix it's going to take in order to. I mean, a particular bugbear of mine is doing missions, and okay, if you're in low sec, you want to have your system window open. Stick it up on the left hand side. Mission doesn't pop up in front of it, so you have to sort of screw around to try and find mission, walk to mission status, and so forth. It's just irritating. There should be a better way of doing it. That's just one of the. Do you want more ideas?
Yeah, if you had some more quality of life ideas, we always like to hear them.
Well, I think returning to the point about player harassment, I mean, one of the things that I thought about was that if you get people who are persistently ganking in high sec, then one of the points that is made is, okay, this is a sandbox, people can do what they like. But if you think of reputation in real life, okay, fine, you have a player who uses their million skill points to get into a gank cat and go cause trouble, gets themselves -5 plus, and then starts a new alpha character and does the same all over again. My thought is that if you're going to resolve that, then reputation, as in your security status, should also influence your corporation security status. So if you're a persistent ganker and your corporation's persistently ganking, then the corporation reputation should suffer as well. And segueing off of that, if you're a complete asswipe who just spends their time disrupting other players' games for the hell of it without their consent, Okay, fine, you undock, you consent to PvP. But if you're consistently doing it in high sec and causing issues, then at some point you don't use stargates anymore. Not for 1 minute, not for the 1 minute timer. Oh no, you stop using those stargates until your reputation gets to a point where the stargate operators are going to let you through.
No, that's
And
very interesting
if
idea
you're
as
a
well.
pirate, you'll get shot. So if
Okay.
you behave badly in game, there are consequences. And this is one of the issues I have with high sec Eve. I'm sure that I'm going to get a lot of bad traffic for this. But you have low sec, you have null sec, you have wormhole sec, JSpace. You can shoot each other to your heart's content in those space. You know, you go in there, you're going to get trouble. You're in high sec. There's kind of, excuse the background noise. The you're in high sec. There is a certain expectation that you have a certain level of safety. So I would say that if you gank someone in 1.0 space, that's an immediate -10 loss of reputation, and you're not using any stargates in high sec until you improve it. You gank someone in -5 reputation, and if you drop below -5, you're not using 0.5 stargate. Not
Your
until you improve your reputation.
microphone's
That's
breaking
my
up a little
thought.
bit.
So bad behavior in high sec should have consequences.
Just to let you know, your microphone is starting to fade in and out a little bit.
I've stunned you. I've actually silenced you.
Systems, they're not able to plug and play properly. Anyway, I'm going to have a drink and then we can carry on. You can ramble about my ramblings just now.
Well, so we just talked about the high set gankers, and now do you believe that that is the absolute biggest challenge facing Eve players today, or is there something else?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, Eve is an older game, and therefore generating content for high-end players is always a problem. So on the one hand, you need to introduce new players into the game. On the other hand, you need to retain your players. And so some of what they've done, I think, is very good. The new releases and what they've done with the new releases are really cool. I mean, and the way they do it with storyline, I think, has been pretty cool. I actually have quite some admiration. They could almost get to producing Eve the movie with some of the stuff they've done. So yeah, I mean, on that side, one of the things I would say as a candidate for CSM, I don't believe that my position would be specifically for the high-end players because they've got enough representation. You have all of the 4 factions well represented on the CSM who can propose new content. Where I believe it's important is in that beginner to middle layer of smaller corporations, the small corporations in JSpace, you know, how to make their life more entertaining, how to provide the content in the middle-sized low-sec corporations, how to provide content for the high-sec corporations doing things to make the game engaging for people. And I think there is no problem with this. By the way, all the bleeps in the background, that's Discord trying to connect to 2 devices. So my thought is it's really in providing the influence on the storyline to engage people who aren't just in those big faction corporations.
Okay. And if you made it to the CSM and you were able to give CCP suggestion to help new player retention, what suggestions would you make?
Well, I'd gone through a few of them, and I think, as I say, we have to have the debate about what high sec's for. Is high sec genuinely high sec? At what level is high sec? Maybe we need a not so high sec where certain levels of player versus player violence is more acceptable. But we have to make it possible for the small player, the beginner player, to do that migration into larger ships where it doesn't cost them a month's worth of effort and they give up. And I'm very specific about that because you go for your first coveter and it's a massive investment for you. It takes a long time to get the wherewithal to get together to do that, and so enabling them to be able to function without having auto death from highly experienced players who are just having bullying fun going around killing people in high sec. So
oh,
making my point of making high sec violence more consequence driven is the point.
okay.
So I think of some engagements where where I've been ganked. Okay, ice mining and ISEC with a Hulk, you're asking for trouble. But the point being that players involved have no consequence. Okay, their ships, which are relatively cheap, get destroyed by the Concorde, but they just go out, they get a new one, carry on going. There is no consequence.
So I was on Frozen Fallout's show, Federation Frontline Report, and someone asked me during the interview if I thought that maybe it's a good idea that, like, the first 30 days, new players ungankable. What do you think about that idea?
I mean, it's an idea. I think people need to learn how to play, but I think you have to change. It's a rules-based thing. One of the things about me is I worked for probably about 25 years in government level politics of one sort or another, and you have to drive things by consequence-driven behaviour. So if you decide you're going to drive your car terribly fast on the motorway, you're going to lose your license.
Okay.
So in the same way, if you're going to go around causing harassment for players in an area of the game which should be less prone to PvP, then there will be consequences, that your life will be made a lot more difficult. So, for example, access might be withdrawn. And actually, I think some of this might be quite positive. So if, for example, you said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the size of high sec. We're going to make the trade routes low sec. So the big Amar, Galant, Minmatar, all of these major trade routes. So you think Udima, you think of going through was it Karani? Then you make it low sec. So that would boost courier business. So if you want to get everything to G244, you're going to have to pay a courier to do it safely. Likewise, it would also boost more local trade hubs. So if you can't move your Nice from Amar to Jita easily, then you try to sell it in Amar, and therefore it would boost the more local trade hubs.
Okay.
And the second point, so it would boost part of the game, which has kind of gone down a bit. And the other thing is that if you change the game mechanics so that if you are a complete scumbag and your corporation's full of complete scumbags, you can't even fly into high sec, and you're not reasonably going to have a prospect of flying into high sec, then all of a sudden the case the low sec or null sec trade hubs becomes a thing. And that might be a good part. That might be a good part of the game as well. So, say for example that Turner, the entrance into the new part of the game,
Zarazak,
yeah, Zarazaka. I couldn't pronounce it. You had to pronounce it first for me. But Turner, for example, might be a great place for a trade hub, as dangerous as hell, but on the route and out of high sec. So if you've really managed to hack off the Minmatar so that they don't want you to go anywhere near Heck anymore, then you can do your trade in Turner.
All right. Interesting ideas. Now, when is the last time that you actually ran the NPE?
Sorry?
The new player experience.
3 years ago, probably.
Was that before the update?
I ran one character through the latest update. It's kind of good. I mean, the thing is, the problem I have with the newest NPE is it doesn't really reflect the game very well. So how much it helps you in easing into the game is, yeah, it's kind of a different game to the games that you're going to be playing.
Okay. Now we're gonna go.
I like.
Oh,
I really like the first set of missions where you're going out. You go out and do stuff. You get a venture. You get a.
oh, the career missions. Yeah.
Yeah, the career missions. And I really like those career missions, and extending them to advanced career missions might be an idea. And EverQuest did this, so you could run you could run a kind of a career mission in EverQuest 2 all the way up to level 90.
Yeah, I vaguely seem to remember that.
It's kind of fun actually, but yeah.
So now,
You get a silly hat at the end of it.
so now we're gonna kind of switch thoughts from new players to the community that they become part of. What's your definition of community in EVE?
Well, I think it's there's 2 or 3 different parts of it. Firstly, I would say here. So in the Discord community where you're able to share ideas and get help. Secondly, corporations in game and alliances in game. And finally, I don't underestimate the albeit difficult to follow new player chat channel. I think that I've not been a part of it for over a year, but I used to be a part of it, and I used to help people in need. You know, if you're foolish enough to go into a wormhole and you haven't made adequate preparations, then sometimes sometimes a kind player might help you out, and I have done that. More often they'll just gank you, but I have an enormous sympathy for people who are just starting out. People used to touch me up for a venture now and again. I always made the point that if they were struggling, I could give them a tier 1 venture with a basic kit for free and go forth and prosper. And I've always been, if people are around and they want an invite into an Orca fleet in high set, I'm not dumb enough to fly an Orca in low set. But you know, if people want an invite into a high set fleet I'm running, then yeah, come on. Makes no difference to me. Take the boost and enjoy it.
Okay, so then we are going to look at some toxicity. Now, for the Twitch chat out there, toxicity isn't necessarily PvP. It's not necessarily ganking. People have their different opinions, I know that. But the actual activity of ganking in itself is not toxic. Going and blapping 1 day old, the null set groups, warring, even some minor salt, you know, out there rubbing it in. What I'm really looking at is the real world stuff that people bring into the game, the racism, you know, the transphobia, homophobia, sexism, and all that stuff. Do you think it's as big of a problem today as it used to be?
Well, I've seen some of it. Look, I'm transgendered, so in case you haven't worked it out, I'm transgendered. I've been on the receiving end of some pretty unpleasant stuff from people who have a philosophical objection to people like me. I'm a bit of a cliche, really. Gay transgender Jew. What can I say? Well, technically. So yeah, I've had my fair share of toxicity, and I think the general rule applies, but I'm going to do this at several levels. Okay, so this is going to be kind of an interesting thing. In the first case, then if you've got someone who's persistently being an ass in chat channel and you control the chat channel, the best thing to do is just kick him out of it. There is no place for openly abusive, aggressive behavior in society generally, let alone games. So that's the one level. So there is just simply the question of being polite and nice to each other, or at least reasonable to each other. Yeah, okay. It's a game where there is a lot of one-on-one in-game violence, and there's going to be assault, and there is going to be a bit of to and fro. People have to learn not to get involved in in that local banter, because it doesn't do anybody good, and it can sort of descend into silliness. Openly, let's just say the word "ist" attacks, then that's something wrong and should be reported. And the gamer involved should face sanction from CCP, and I suspect they do.
Yeah.
So you can report it. The second thing is, I would say, is a legal issue. That CCP actually has a responsibility of care in gaming under various online safety regulations. So players there is a responsibility for players who are on the receiving end of such behaviour to report it, because those players who've engaged in online harassment of one sort or another, especially if it is IST-based, have committed an offence, certainly under European law, probably not under American law, maybe under Canadian law, definitely under Swiss law. So they have committed an offence, and CCP is jointly and severally liable if they don't resolve it. So there is that potential legal side of it as well.
So then, when you encounter it in the game, what do you personally do?
Oh, I've got alligator skin. I either ignore it or tell them to go forth and prosper.
Okay.
Like I say, I worked in politics as a transgender person working in politics. What do you reckon?
Do you report it when you see it in game?
Depends. I mean, to be honest, I haven't seen it for a year or so. I've not actually seen anything in game. I don't tend to follow locals that much. I haven't really seen anything in game recently. There was a spate of it a couple of years ago, and there was a bunch of people from a certain demographic who were doing all sorts of sweary nonsense in local against players who they thought might be not of their particular outlook.
Okay.
And that did get reported, not by me actually, by other people. I suspect the players were probably banned.
Well, it's really good to hear that you aren't directly running into it. I've heard that from a few other CSM candidates, so I'm glad that it's getting cleaned up in some places. But now,
yeah, but I think it's important actually, just to sort of dwell on the point for a moment. I think it is important. Calling people dicks for doing one thing in game, okay, you're a dick, you killed me. Yeah, okay, fine, salt. Take a screenshot and put it in the salt channel in your corporation. Yay. If someone comes in and says you're an offence to humanity, you should be killed, I'm going to find you, I'm going to hunt you down and kill you, that needs to be reported.
Yep, 100%. But now we're going to switch to my favorite part. You got onto the CSM.
Go on. Yep.
But you are in your first meeting. It is revealed to you what is going to be going on during your term, and nothing that you really are passionate about or you're expert at made it into the game. What do you think you're going to do?
Well, look at what it is they're asking from you. I mean, the point of the CSM is you're a customer service manager. So the whole point of it is that you're there to reflect on what they're proposing and give feedback. I mean, if it's rubbish, you say it's rubbish. Politely. This could be done better. You're not there as an architect. So if there are things that you think that can be done better, then yeah, fine. Get your PowerPoint skills together and make the presentation when you have the opportunity so to do. But if your stuff is not on the agenda, you're there to work with what is on the agenda and deliver it, or feedback on it and say this is crap, you shouldn't do it.
Okay, so now, of course, you know that if
introducing elves into the game, bad idea. What are you doing?
Oh, no, or My Little Pony. Yeah, not happening.
My Little Pony. Yeah, not happening.
So,
mind you, My Little Pony spaceship.
No. So
it's a shuttle. Come on, pink and shuttle.
Now you know when you play Eve long enough that things are going to get changed. Things that you like using will be nerfed or maybe even taken out of the game completely.
Yep.
You find out that CCP has decided to nerf orcas to hell and back, but it's actually going to be better for the game. Again, yes. Even more than before. But when you find out what the changes are, they could be actually okay for the game. But your community is probably going to be really pissed off.
Really angry.
What are
yes.
you going to do?
I mean, orcas aren't really used so much anymore. But anyway, okay, I take the principle of the question. I would raise a particular bugbear of mine. When they nerfed mining crystals, I'd invested in a whole load of mining crystal blueprints and gone off to the ends of the galaxy to get them, and had one ship blown up with them, had to go back and get more. And then when they changed them to the mining type XYZ, they gave me about half of the blueprints back. And that sort of thing pisses people off, and I would make that representation to the developers. You nerf the hell out of an asset which someone's spent an awful lot of ISK on, then at least give them some reasonable compensation for it, because otherwise people are going to get pissed.
Yep.
And actually, and that's actually something which drives mature players, the sort of people who are prepared to spend $50 a month on the game. That's the sort of thing which will say, okay, fine, I'm going alpha until they sort their crap out.
I totally agree. I do think that there's some things that CCP has dropped the ball on that regard, definitely.
Because yeah, I mean, this is actually somewhere where my experience of project management, project delivery, and customer management comes in. That I can offer an opinion on the reception of this and how you deal with the reception, because this is not about necessarily the game, it's about how you handle people and make sure that you keep the people, if not happy, at least content something has been done when you make radical changes.
I agree. So then, as we all know, there are.
Well, you've been a CSM. I mean,
Yep.
I've been a CSM in different kind of roles. So you and
Yep.
I both know that it's not about actually necessarily creating policy. It's about reflecting on policy and making the policy makers understand the consequence of the policy and work on how to mitigate the negative impact of that policy. Because as P.T. Barnum says, you can't all the people happy all the time.
Yep, absolute 100%. And going into that, players do seem to expect that the CSM are supposed to fix issues or demand unpopular policies to be reversed, as with Equinox. Have you given?
I never had that expectation. You know, as I mentioned earlier on, what prompted me to go into this was the suggestion that I could raise ideas specifically about the behaviour of certain groups of people in HiSec as a CSM. And if there is no voice doing it at the moment, then maybe I should be the one to put myself forward for it. So I have no illusions about being able to specifically solve a player's problem in their play. As someone who is experienced in the game and knows more experienced players, I can point them in the direction of people who can help. I mean, you know, anybody who's I frequently ask help from people in games for fits, because especially when it comes to PvP, I'm the first to admit I'm absolutely terrible. I've never been any good at PvP in any game. I'm good at strategy, but logistics, understanding how mechanics work. But I'm the first to reach out, and I think as there are two aspects to this, and maybe you'll disagree with me or not. On the aspect of being in the CSM, you can proffer ideas that fall on fertile ground or not. You can raise issues which have been raised by players, and it will fall on fertile ground or not. But in game, as a CSM, you are a high-profile character, and you can reach out to people who can help in game for things which can be resolved in terms of just understanding the gameplay better.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is a part of this question is, so players like say they have that perception of the CSM that we can go fix things, but as you have rightly mentioned, we're advisors. But we also have that NDA. And when you become a CSM, you get a glimpse behind the curtain, so to speak, and you actually get quite a bit of information. Have you thought how you're going to balance knowing this information, knowing what the bugbear is, knowing why CCP changed things, and dealing with people who think that you can go and demand these reversals?
I have worked as a program manager in places that I can't even tell you about, doing work that I cannot tell you about. I'm used to levels of NDAs which are far beyond what CCP could ever inflict on me.
Okay, so, but again, how do you think you're going to bring this to the players?
Well,
what do you think that you're going to be able to say to them to make them feel heard?
Well, if there are proposals on the table which are covered by the NDA, you cannot bring them to the players. It's just as simple as that. It's covered by the NDA. There you are, unless you want to get sued and banned. So I've worked within those constraints over many years. You don't get to build secure data centers if you can't go through security clearance to really quite a high level. You don't get to work on new pharmaceutical development unless you can keep secrets.
Okay, so it sounds like you pretty much are equipped to deal with this problem.
Been there, done it, got the T-shirt.
Now,
got the promotional T-shirt from the group event. Yes.
So now I have a few questions from my own community, and one of them is about multi-boxing. Half of the community are multi-boxers. They multi-box home fronts. They may do incursions, mining, all that good stuff. And then I have players who think that we should go down to one account only, and maybe even torch characters 2 and 3. What's your stance?
Oh, that's a controversial question. I'm a multi-boxer, okay? Hands up. I run 4 characters. If you're mining, given the Orca nerf, then you can't really effectively mine in an Orca anymore. You need to have some else that will mine with you. So there is a place for multi-boxing. I wouldn't recommend it in PvP. Probably not a good idea. And I'm not sure it's a terribly good idea in PvE either. I actually tried quite recently, quite spectacularly failed to do a tier 5 site and lost a couple of ships. It served me right to trying to be arrogant in Frybox. So I think on the question of multi-box, it has a place in the game. I would maybe say that we need to take a look at some of these big Hoover fleets. So when you get 20 characters in the same fleet who are hoovering up an ice field in Ice, then we need to ask whether that's someone's actually breaking the rules of the game.
Okay.
If you're looking at the question is, how do you police this? So if you have someone who's actually able to run 4 accounts doing mines, for example, ice mining, fine. What the hell? If you have someone who's clearly botting, so they've got some program that's managing the selection of asteroids to mine, then that's a problem because you're not supposed to bot in this game. And so that's an escalation issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that you kind of have to look at it from both the player point of view and the CCP's point of view. And if someone's prepared to pay the money to get all of these accounts, then from CCP's point of view, yay, money. From the point of view of the other players, I mean, I spent a year doing just nothing but ice mining, and you get one character come in with 12 mining ships and hoover the whole fucking belt up. Sorry, you have to sense that. In 2 minutes. they're botting. It's just really ugly on other players. So yeah, where do you strike the balance and how do you police it? I think is the problem. So think of it. Put your CSM cap on for a moment and say, well, what would you be your proposal for balancing it? So my attitude to this is to say the game at the moment kind of has the balance, but not much more effort needs to be spent on getting rid of the bot farms.
Okay.
And I think that's really where the issue comes. Having 3 or 4 accounts, what the heck? To be honest, most of the people I know who have multiple accounts only ever use 2 at a time anyway.
Okay. And then we're going to move into, out of everything that we talked about, maybe there's things that we didn't talk about. What do you think is the most pressing issue in EVE overall?
That is a bit of a split question. I'd like to say new content, but I suspect that there are people who are handling that. I think the biggest problem that's facing EVE as a game for survivability, so think about it in terms of commercial games that have to survive, it's new player retention.
Okay, fair enough. Now I'm going to open it up to Twitch chat. If you have any questions, I know I saw one come by.
Far away.
Yeah. Let's see.
Cheers, guys. I'm running out of beer here.
Here we go. Why do you think so many new players gravitate towards mining as a fun activity?
Because it's the easiest part of the game when you're a new player. It's slow, but it's the easiest part.
So CCP has been really buffing up faction warfare, and they really kind of want to get players out of the career missions and over into faction warfare. Do you think that that's a good route to go, where they're actually running into real people and engaging?
I think it's an excellent route, but it's getting people to take the step from solo mining to working in a group. That's where we need to pay attention, and that's where you need to have more public fleets.
Do you think that, for those of you that don't know, one of the very last things that you do in the new player experience right before you go to the career missions is you do like a mining mission? There's like a little storyline, stuff like that, but it really pushes mining. Do you think that gives new players a big perception that mining is the thing to do?
Yes, I guess it does, but that's always been the case since the beginning. So before the new player experience that you have now, it was always a thing that mining was pushed as a way of progressing. So mine stuff, sell stuff, and then you can buy better ships.
Okay. And then I have one last question for you. Hopefully I hope they're all like furiously typing over there, because you're going to lose your chance. Twitch chat, you're going to lose your chance.
Go ahead, come on, Twitch up.
Out of the 48 other candidates, who would you like to see elected alongside you?
Well, clearly you. I mean, obviously. I mean, what else could I say?
But is there any of the other players that you've listened to their interviews or interacted with that you think would be really good for EVE?
There was a German guy that you interviewed just after me, I think. Or was interviewed second. Forget his name.
Just a second.
He sounded very positive. A lot of this stuff. It's just same old world. Big corporation stuff. I mean, I vote for these dudes.
Okay.
So I have to look it up, which means sort of looking away from this screen. So yeah, he seemed to have a real affinity for the new player to teenager player experience. So my point about this is, and here is something that I did actually think about as one of the possible things for player game improvement, was if you had, for want of a better platform, a Concord missions that said form a fleet, get players who have been under a certain amount of time in the game, and go and do this thing. If you had some form of incentivized fleet generation and interaction to help the newer players get used to doing things like faction warfare, then that would drag people who are starting the game into the broader part of the game. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you would do it, because the game mechanics would be tricksy to do within the game mechanics. But if you, for example, you wanted to be a high-sec defender of the faith, and part of that was to do missions for the Mar Council, using that as an example, or the Gallant Council, that said find some new miners and get them to get into their catalysts that we've given them, and go and sort out these pirates who are part of the faction. This might be the way forward. So whoever forms the fleet gets a bunch of loyalty points in ISK. Whoever's in the fleet gets into loyalty points in ISK. And so it introduces them to the idea.
So another question is, in your opinion, what activities define the natural progression of a player in EVE?
Well, there's several. I know guys who went straight from high-sec into J-space and were huffing gas. It's a route, quite a profitable route. It gets you ISK quite quickly, and you don't really have to have anything particularly clever to do it. I know people who went into mission fleets, doing class 4 mission activities. You get a Vexel, off you go. 3 other people in it, 4 other people in a Vexel. The fleet commander has got some idea of what they're doing, and you go off and do a hard mission, and you get a reasonable ISK payout. So, getting people to understand the relationship between ISK and improving your game, so that you understand that you can use ISK to buy skill, you can use it to buy better equipment, you can use the skill to get skills to use better equipment. So that progression. One of the points that I would make, and it's actually, I'm going to come on to another point, so excuse me, segueing into something else. But one of the points about EVE is it's a social game. So really you perform best in fleet. So that also reflects back onto the multi-boxer. So the multi-boxer creates their own fleet. Good multi-boxers then say, okay, come on and join me in fleet, because hey, why not? But it is a fleet-based game where you are supposed to interact with other players. And that segues into the bank in the plane of tranquility. You will recall this from your days in EverQuest, that people were forming groups, shouting out in local group forming to go and do this activity. And you don't get that in EVE. There isn't that sort of place you go. So you're in a trade hub, for example, and say someone's shouting out, forming group to go and do this activity. Well, that doesn't seem to happen in EVE, and that actually is something that might improve the game for newer players. You need a bank outside of the plane of knowledge.
I agree. And last question for tonight is, if you could get CCP to iterate on something that was introduced and then never really progressed, what would you suggest to them?
Oh, planetary industry. I mean, they launched it and then did nothing with it, and it's a mess.
I 100% agree on that. I have a character out in wormhole space that just kind of sits there because I got through the first couple clicks and said, screw this, and left.
It's a nightmare. The controlling the time, controlling the activity. Ugh, it's such a pain in the back. One of my side gigs is making fuel blocks, and there is I have an hour every day running around PIs it out, and it's man, please make it better. Take away the pain.
Yeah. CCP really loves putting these little micro busy activities into the game.
No, they really need to sort out. I mean, that also reflects back on the POCOs. So you get these POCOs from a corporation. I remember that one time having been kicked out of a wormhole, I reset all of my supply chains for fuel blocks, and I sent a message to the corporation leader of an ownership POCO. No response ever, because they'd left the game. So why is that POCO? Now, why is that POCO still there if they've left the game? So this is why I say that actually my idea, and feel free to steal this if you end up on CSM and I don't. You put fuel into a POCO. Not much. You just need, you say, but it has to be 30 days, and after 30 days it runs out. And if it runs out, POCO falls into the planet. And if you want to put the POCO back, the planet wants an extra 50% because you just destroyed a city with your falling orbital gear.
I like that. Okay, so if people are watching Twitch or they watch this video later on YouTube and want to carry on the conversation, how can they reach you?
I'll be in Verney's Keller Bar in about half an hour if you're in Switzerland. You have to know where it is. Probably smoking a cigar because it's one of these retrograde places where you can eat and smoke and drink. Otherwise, you can reach me in Discord. I do have a Discord channel. You can reach me there, obviously, on the feed, the CSM feed on the forums.
Okay.
I will normally respond within about half a day. It depends. If you're in America and you ping me in the middle of the night, I'm asleep. I don't respond when I'm asleep. Not even the cats. They can call me, dance up and down on me. I'm used to them. I grew up with them, so I know their behaviour. So they really need to make an effort to wake me up. So yeah, I will respond on the forums in a reasonable time. That's a easy place to get me. Otherwise, through you, Kishar, or I guess I'll be staying in Eve Lucas from now on. So.